Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Our panel is just touching upon the one of the greatest issues that we can have with digital markets, creating equitability, or at the same time preventing unfair dominance. And this is going to be our general focus. But apart from that, we are going to tackle some specific issues relating to financial market, data, algorithms. And for that, we have a wonderful set of speakers. Karolina Mojzesowicz, Deputy Head of Data Protection Unit, DG Justice, European Commission. Will Hayter, Senior Director of the Digital Market Unit's Competition and Markets Authority, UK. Arvind Gupta, President of Digital India Foundation. Professor Joachim Wuermeling, Executive Board Member, Bundesbank. And Karolina Toloba, IT Risk Division, Banco de Espana. I would like to begin the panel with a very general question. The most general question that one can pose in the area, actually. And this is, what are the broad general challenges when it comes to shaping policy and regulating digital markets? On one hand, to prevent unfair dominance, which is the natural tendency on the market, and at the same time, promote innovation, not to exclude it. And this is a question that I would like to address to all panelists, starting with Karolina Mojzesowicz.
Hello, hello everybody. Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, a very broad question, but actually we are all turning around that. So, how to get it? What are the challenges? The challenge is to get it right. The challenge is to set the cursor between the regulation, which is ex ante, and the antitrust, classical antitrust appliance, which is ex post, at a right point, so that we do not stifle the innovation, but on the other hand, we ensure what was always one of the aims of the EU competition law, flexibility by the market structure. So in the sense that there are no unheardable barriers to entry and to exit, because this precisely is what stifles the competition. And here, this part, what you know, we tabled, and the Data Market Act is already adopted, Data Services Act. We have Data Act, which is also going very much into this direction, ensuring this contestability, fairness, in a little bit broader terms, the Data Act. Other tools, legislative tools, are still more in doing and are addressing slightly different aspects. But all of these tools are digital solutions in order to ensure that businesses can enjoy the new opportunities, that we encourage development of trustful technology, that we foster open democratic society, and so on. But now here, how did we try, because this was a very general introduction, how did we try to get it right? And we are very much convinced that we did. In this particular situation, what happened in the DMA in particular in Europe. So we looked at who are we dealing with, large intermediaries who condition the entry and the conditions of the competition on the market. So with this very targeted intervention of ex-ante regulation, we established a narrowly defined objective criteria for qualifying platforms. So the gatekeepers, I think we do not have time so that I can enter in the qualification of the gatekeepers, but yeah, here we build it. I think it's also very important to say that in this balance between regulation, competition, antitrust, classical tools, we are falling back on an experience we gained already in telecommunication markets. will maybe remember the regulation and opening up of the telecommunication markets, and the complementary regulation, which was supposed precisely to induce more competition, to break up the situations of the established incumbents, as we said. What I think it's very important by the regulation and by ensuring that it's not stifling innovation and maintaining and not stifling incentives to invest, what it's always such a big problem, is that it stays very flexible, that it allows for a very targeted action by the enforcer where it's needed. So to in the case of the DMA, to ensure, what we did is, in order to ensure that new gatekeeper rules keep up with the fast pace of the digital markets, we, the Commission, will carry out market investigation, and these investigations will allow us to qualify companies as gatekeepers, update dynamically the obligations for the gatekeepers when it's necessary, and design the remedies accordingly. I mean, I'm very happy to develop on that, but I think, Aneta, you'll kill me on this already.
Yes, and now I would like to ask Will to give us a view of national view, and from not a lawmaker perspective, but from a perspective of execution.
Thanks very much, Aneta, and thanks very much to the organisers for having me. I think it's really important to remember that a very significant part of the purpose of new approaches to tackling harms from market power is precisely to enhance innovation. And I think it's worth bearing in mind the potential sources of that innovation. And I think there are at least three. First, if you think about the firms with market power themselves, the more pressure they are under, the more likely to innovate. It's perhaps part of competition policy 101 that monopolists don't need to innovate as hard if their position is not under threat. So we want to create ideally a sense of those positions being under threat. Secondly, then you've got firms that are using the powerful platforms to run their businesses, and there are many of those. If you think about app developers, advertisers on search or social media, web developers, marketplace sellers, etc., all of those need predictable access on reasonable terms in order to be able to pursue their own innovation, whatever that might be for their particular purposes. And thirdly, then, of course, and really importantly, there are the firms that compete directly against the most powerful, and those firms need a fair run at those markets. In the current position with market power, there might not be a level playing field, which makes it directly harder to innovate. But actually, even the perception of an unlevel playing field could itself chill innovation and cause investors not to want to step in. So in thinking about how to strike the right balances in these approaches, we need to recognise those overall points, but then, of course, get very much into the specifics of remedies, as Karolina finished on. And that is all very context-specific. I think as a broad point, anything done through regulation or enforcement needs to be very targeted, very evidence-based, very proportionate. And to do that, we should certainly avoid assuming that any kind of one-size-fits-all solutions are the answer. The markets and business models we're talking about here across digital markets are all very different. But if we think about some of the choices that one might face in designing remedies, one example could be the balance between managing the harm caused by market power up front versus tackling that power in the longer term. And there could conceivably be a trade-off between those two things if doing the former reduces incentives for firms to come in and erode that market power in the longer term. But then in considering very specific remedies, I'll give one example. When we looked at digital advertising markets, we looked at the possibility of interoperability to counteract network effects in social media networks. There we felt it would probably be best to avoid full protocol interoperability, because that would mean the regulator defining the shape of those services and thereby constraining innovation. But we did highlight some more basic forms of interoperability, such as friend finding or cross-posting, as being approaches that could address the network effects while not holding back the innovation. So in short, much of what we're interested in here is about supporting innovation through making markets more contestable. But it really all comes down to the specifics of how particular remedies are set to make sure we strike the right balance.
Thank you very much. And now the third angle. Please, Arvind.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to be back on RAID for the H2 conference. Let me just add my perspective from what my co-panelists have already said. But we all know digital markets and digital platforms are a winner-takes-all market, which basically means that a few players have a lot of power, and that really creates the imbalance that we're talking about. Two, while these are designed with, they have a reach of billions today, but they are designed with a very top-down approach. They are not really diverse in their product thinking, in the way they have been created, and that itself brings about certain inequalities and certain issues that I will highlight. And the third thing is that while they talk about trust in technology, there is a trust actually lacks, and the common users at the bottom of the pyramid who are now adopting digital platforms really are not aware of the trust issues, and that is there is a inherent trust issues, which is also directly and indirectly linked with the biggest issues of our time, which is geopolitics, geoeconomics, and taxation, and many things else. So I think we are seeing all of this play out as we are discussing this today in this forum. The classic rule of three. Most of the digital markets, the large platforms, tend to be about two. So we have not been able to create the third dominant player in respective markets, and that is the cause of lack of as Will was saying, the monopolistic behavior leads to a lack of innovation also, and lack of market competition. So how do we do this? And one of the thoughts I have always propagated is that we need to think about how in respective markets countries, states can create their own digital public infrastructure, which is built on solving for local problems, solving for local issues, creating an innovation ecosystem, built on a bottom-up approach, built on a trust in technology approach, and serves two purposes. Number one, serves the purpose of creating our competition, the third big player in the market. And two, it has a dual purpose of being a regulatory tool to ensure fairness in operation. So, and to substantiate what I'm trying to say is, I'll give you two examples coming from specifically from India. Number one is a platform that we have set up for the payments in India, called the Unified Payments Interface, UPI. Now, UPI today as volume accounts for 72% of India's payments as volumes, 72% in 5 years. And it has created the third network along with the two dominant networks globally that we are all aware. So it is stigma on technology, creating the rule of three, bringing about a third force in competition from a competition perspective. Two, it is built as a non-rent seeking digital public platform, which means everybody has access to it. And what it has done is that it has now created by itself value equivalent to $400 billion in the startup ecosystem, in the fintech ecosystem of India. So, and this is a publicly owned digital public good. So what I'm trying to say is that it has solved and checkmarked a lot of these issues of trust, digital public goods, competition, and lastly, it has also acted as a model implementation of a payment system and provided the techno-legal tools as a techno-legal framework that other systems need to adhere to. So we've been able to kind of address multiple issues with a single platform. And I think that is one approach that I think that we should think about as we move along. And it is possible when a country as diverse, as big as India has been able to do with more than 1 billion people. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think Arvid's presentation was a beautiful introduction for our two next speakers who represent, broadly speaking, financial sector. So first, I would like to ask Joachim for a few words.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aneta. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to be in this multidiscipline panel, having data protection, having competition, having innovation, and also having banking supervisors. Of course, we have a very specific perspective. We have not yet dominance in the digital finance sector. The traditional finance sector is still prevailing, but of course we have additional risks by innovative providers from financial services. We have also new players which are not supervised institutions, but they are contributing to the financial service provision, but they are not under our control. So what I hope today from this panel for me is to learn about the causes of the development of monopolies, because that may help us to avoid that we end up in monopolies in digital payments or digital credit or whatever someday. But that might prove to be difficult. The main issue or the main challenge, that's what you, Aneta, asked, for regulation in this area comes from the fact that it is not a linear innovation, but it is disruption. And the instruments of supervision, but it may be also competition, the instruments are very well apt to cover existing business models, existing economic developments, and existing structures. But they are not able to really cover disruptive innovations. And this is why I personally very much welcome the various initiatives of the European Commission to indeed design new instruments to cover the new challenges for competition in the digital space. And this is indeed the same thing for banking supervision. When we look at cryptocurrencies, when we look at platforms, when we look at outsourcing to cloud providers, these are all phenomena which we hardly can address by the existing toolkit, and this is why it is necessary to create new tools, which is already underway with the MiCA. I think we will talk about that later. So here, this is of course the main challenge, and with that challenge comes the difficulty, and other panelists alluded already to that, to find the right balance with innovation and mitigating risk. There is the tremendous speed of the innovation, and there's also, let's be honest, the difficulty for supervisors, at least for banking financial supervisors, to understand all that from the technical point of view. Look at the Wirecard case we had here in Germany, and the reason was also that this could last so long, that we just didn't really understand the globally scaled business model, and these are the kind of things we should try to avoid in the future.
Thank you very much, and I would like to now pass the floor to Karolina.
Thank you, Aneta, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this panel. After all the other colleagues have said, I would like to emphasize three challenges for shaping the regulatory environment. First, the regulatory perimeter. Should something be regulated or not? It's not very clear sometimes what should be regulated or not. The second challenge would be the level playing field. It's not as easy as it seems to reach this level playing field, because it requires a consistent and timely approach in different jurisdictions to implement the legal requirements. And last but not least, I would insist in something that the professor said about banking supervisors. We face challenges to follow the pace of the evolution of technology and to analyze the risks that new technologies pose. And regarding dominance, I would talk about the DORA regulation, the new Digital Operational Resilience Act of the European Commission that will enter into force soon, because it sets up a framework for to oversee critical third-party providers that are IT providers that can be critical for the financial sector in Europe. So this will be a very new initiative to at least ensure the resiliency of the sector as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to now focus on some of the issues that have been already voiced, which is how to make sure that the legislative intervention comes timely, although it is in its nature to be behind the market developments, and those market developments those days are happening in such a pace that it's difficult to, first of all, understand what Joachim was saying, to understand what is happening, and second of all, to make a legal qualification and to decide whether or not we need legal intervention. And given that those developments are happening on so many different levels at the same time, it is necessary to make sure that the legislative scheme will be coherent and will not be overlapping, contradictory, etc., etc. Hence, my question to Karolina from the European Commission. We have two Karolinas, so I need to distinguish. So Karolina from the European Commission with K. How can European Union achieve this horizontal compatibility of legislation? And of course, here the first question that strikes is the GDPR, but this is not the only area where the overlapping may be happening, considering how many different areas are taken by online platforms, by digital markets. So what's your thought on that?
Thank you very much. Well, I work mainly on the questions concerning the GDPR and precisely ensuring this coherence of the legislative tools we present from the point of view of GDPR. So there I have a little bit of more experience directly, but generally we are always in very carefully assessing the impact of the new legislation concerning already the existing one, be it from the point of view of consumer protection, which is also very important in anything which concerns regulation of the platforms, questions of fundamental rights, not only fundamental right of personal data, but also other fundamental rights, therefore also DSA, and so on. I think that, I hope, because this is what we want to ensure, that all these new instruments are building as far as personal data processing is concerned, and the principles and on which it is based as established in the GDPR, they are, so all these new instruments are developing on them coherently. Sometimes they go back to the GDPR and they just complement it. Sometimes they develop on it while adding something and becoming a kind of lex specialis. But yeah, so this is the approach, and our thinking was always that none of what is going on now in the regulation of the ensuring of the consistability of the market, DMA, DSA, none of this would be possible if we would not have established this level playing field, if we would not have worked out the principle as far as personal data is concerned. Of course, I'm not saying that for everything else, but as far as personal data is concerned in the GDPR. So just to give you an example, in the DGA, in the Data Governance Act, the legal basis on which the data is processed is stemming from the GDPR. Nothing in the DGA can happen without there being a legal basis provided for in the GDPR. And as you know, in the GDPR, we have 6 legal bases: consent, contract, law, which is a very important factor, and task and legislation. Now, in the Data Act, because this is very often coming up with this, with Article 5 and the portability obligations there. Indeed, this is a further, it's opening up, building even more on Article 20. It's no restrictions from the legal basis on the basis of which one could have so in the GDPR, the possibility to exercise right of portability was constrained to the data which was processed on 2 specific legal bases for the individuals. Now, in the Data Act, we renounce on it and we provide for this super portability real time, but not as far as businesses are concerned, legal persons. And here I'm drawing attention to Article 5, paragraph 6, where there is a very clear indication that word user is not a data subject. Any personal data generated by the use of product shall only be made available where there is a valid legal basis in Article 6 GDPR and the conditions of Article 9. So this one comment. Now coming just very shortly on what you were saying before, that with the legislation it's always a little bit too late, and this very quick digital markets, what actually also justified the introduction of regulation and not always awaiting the correction of the results ex post, is at least the GDPR, technological neutral, principle based, which is a slight trade-off as far as legal certainty is concerned. And we have a lot of stakeholders who are coming and saying that they would like to have clear rules. But this gives precisely this flexibility so that with the regulation, we do not freeze, we do not address only a certain level of development of the market, and that we do not freeze it, but that we provide for rules which guide and which embrace also future technological developments.
Thank you very much. And I think a dream came true, or Christmas came early to me, because I saw Joachim waving his hand. Was that because you wanted to take a floor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I love the moment when my agenda goes into pieces. I'm not joking.
Thank you very much. I just would like to make...
Yeah, please go ahead.
I would like to make a mark about the coherence of all these kind of very different legislation. Well, of course, we appreciate very much that the Commission, looking around its legal environment before enacting new or proposing new legal acts. But this is, of course, not only an issue of legal cohesion, but there are, of course, also conflicting interests. When you, by, for example, like to promote big data, advanced analytics, the use of granular data. Here, data protection can also be kind of obstacle for that. That's at least what we observe in Bundesbank. The need to know principle, is of course very much justified. On the other hand, when you are on the explorative way forward and looking for what lessons you can learn or what insights can you get from certain data sets without knowing in advance what the outcome would be, these kind of principles are very difficult to overcome. And we have in Bundesbank even the issue that the supervisory data cannot be used for financial stability issues, and the statistical data cannot be used for monetary policy. So these there is not only the issue of legal consistency, but also of what you really want to achieve and what is the prevailing objective.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for showing the dimensions, the different dimensions. And I think for regulating digital markets, that will be the question. Okay, I can give floor back to Karolina for Karolina with K for a short answer, and then we will go to Will.
Thank you very much for the remarks. Our position was always that actually the data protection rules, of course, they frame the possibilities, but it's first of all, it's a fundamental right. It's a choice, societal choice we made, and in order to protect certain values. On the other hand, we were always of the opinion of the way we were designing the rules that actually the GDPR is just framing, but not provide to do something. The possibilities to anonymize, the possibilities to use data which is highly pseudonymized, which is still a personal data, but opens up more possibilities because of the very high safeguards. And indeed, the new legislative proposals are building on it and are trying precisely to address the needs to also really have to be able to use the data we have, bearing in mind different aims we are pursuing, also the aims Professor Wuermeling you were mentioning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karolina. And I take the privilege of ordering this discussion to give a short story from a conference that I attended a couple of years ago, 2-3, just before pandemic, which is important in time frame, where I was shocked by openness of one of representatives of the big tech companies who said that, yes, we do take all the possible clearances and declarations from our users concerning data. But truth be told, we are not sure whether whatever they agree to, this is something that we are going to do, because at the moment we collect data, we don't know exactly for what we are going to use the data in time to come. So considering the speed, the great flexibility of the legislation is of course necessary, but the question, of course, is is there an end to this flexibility in terms of legislative scheme, especially that we are talking about fundamental rights. And now, Will, how does the digital market units work related to whatever is happening at the European Union's level and other work conducted internationally? So what is happening in UK in this regards?
Yeah, thanks very much, Aneta. And I'd like to come back at some point in the conversation to interactions between competition and data protection to the discussion just now, but I think that's probably later in the discussion. So specifically on the DMU, the Digital Markets Unit, and how it relates to other initiatives around the world. I mean, I think the main point to note is that there's lots and lots of common ground in terms of the issues that have been identified. In fact, I think you'd almost say striking levels of unanimity internationally. And that, that is the view that there are certain markets characterized by a combination of various economic effects, network effect, data, economies of scale and scope, etc. And that those kinds of problems, when they present in the form of extreme market power, need a new approach, and the traditional tools don't quite work. So I think on that there's lots of agreement, and actually there's quite a lot of overlap in terms of sort of headline level impressions of the different approaches. So in the UK, the concept is that of strategic market status, which is the idea of entrenched market power with a strategic significance to a large number of firms or a large number of consumers. It intended to be a high bar, probably only a handful of firms to which this would apply, and based on a specific assessment of a particular firm in a particular market. And that once that status is identified, there would be the possibility to set particular requirements on those firms to manage the effects of the market power, and indeed to then try and open up those markets more fully as well. And at that headline level, I think these are quite similar proposals to what's going on in Europe and elsewhere in the world. But there are different ways of delivering that. I think the Digital Markets Act has more of the requirements written in the law up front, whereas in the UK, more is expected to be thought out if you were down the line after the legislation on a principles basis, being a bit more bespoke, a bit more targeted, a bit more flexible. And of course, there are trade-offs in the different approaches, and I'll probably leave it to others to make the comparative value judgments. We are, of course, then also watching elsewhere in the world. So in the US, you've got the various bills being put forward by combinations of different parts of the Congress and the Senate. So the American Innovation Choice and Online Act, the Open App Markets Act. Again, having identified similar problems, I think, and indeed some similar solutions, but of course the process is very different over there. Then, of course, you've got Germany with its own approach, where there's already a change to the competition law in place, and the German authorities have been designating various of the big tech firms with a particular status there. We've got South Korea quite busy on the mobile front in particular. Japan's also got work going on, Australia, etc. So it would almost be a full-time job just to keep up with what's going on around the world. But as I said, I would emphasize the intent, if you like, and the identified problem is pretty similar. I'd also found Arvind's description of what's going on in India very interesting. And I think all of this just underlines the importance of international collaboration. I think it really is the first time where you've got global firms doing broadly similar things in quite a lot of markets. Of course, the market specifics may be different, but again, many of the challenges presented are somewhat similar. And here we all are as national, or in some cases multilateral authorities, trying to take the right approaches to deliver for consumers and for competition in our different jurisdictions. And the more that we can be talking together and sharing approaches, comparing strategies, etc., the better. And we're certainly trying to work hard on that.
Yes, thank you very much. And indeed, this is I think the crucial question here: how to provide legislative answer to global phenomena. And this phenomena is really, for the very first time in human history, probably really global. And on that note, I would like to ask Arvind, how can legislators provide, given the global nature of the issue here, standards for interoperability?
Okay, let me give some 2-3 points before we come to this. Number one, I think this discussion in the context of whether it's any multilateral body, G20, United Nations, or the ITU, is now number one. I'm going to give an acronym, MOSIP. M is it's become mainstream. Everybody's discussing this, so that's the good point. It's become a center of topic for discussion. How do we make markets more competitive, still have innovation, and then also have the whole sovereignty issue? So that's the O How can we have more open platforms, open technologies with trust? S is sovereignty. How can we think about our sovereignty issues, whether it's data sovereignty issues, security issues, or whatever else? So MOS. I is there is a clear interdependence between geopolitics, geoeconomics, and platforms now, digital markets and platforms. So that is definitely happening. But the last is very important, the P, which is the power shift. What has also happened is because of collaborations and conversations, where the markets have existed, a lot of power is shifting. In what I said is there is not only just a top-down approach to how markets or platforms controlled by a few people. It's also now that the countries like India, EU, of course, regions like EU and other nations are coming together to say we need to solve for our own problems. So there's a clear power shift that is happening. It's not a conversation which is localized in a few regions, whether it was Shenzhen towards the east in China or Silicon Valley towards the west in the US. So, having said this, the interoperability is something that uh, the lawmakers or policymakers are understanding the value of that coming and the whether it is setting the standards slash creating that interoperable frameworks, but that has to be done with the trust and the sovereignty considerations that each nation has. So what we are seeing as a movement, whether it's the Digital Public Goods Alliance or the GovStack initiatives that are happening in Europe, is that nations, states, experts, academics are coming together to pool in their platforms and resources and ensuring that they follow the GSM building approach of interoperability of platforms, but they are open goods so that every country can then adopt it to their needs. Every nation can adopt it to their needs and use it, as I said, for both empowerment and protection. Because the consideration of innovation is always there. So when you use any platform for both an empowerment of the citizens, innovation creating innovative startups and empowering the innovation ecosystem, but also providing the protection both to the innovators as well as to the consumers. That is what can happen if this approach to interoperability with the 5 considerations that I mentioned are taken into account. So the base is these considerations, the input are these common goods, digital goods that people have volunteered to given to the global commons, if you can call it, and then developing those interoperability standards, which is left to the techno policymakers globally with alliances that are in place. So, but the good news is this is mainstream now. Everybody's discussing this. These are the topics of discussion in a G20 discussion, in any forum that you may go, multilateral forum that you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Since we have 60 minutes left, I would like to turn to a quite distinctive subject, which is the questions on financial markets, and starting with MiCA, so common standards for crypto assets and the decentralized finance. And question to Joachim: can the MiCA proposal support a level playing field between traditional and crypto-based financial activities?
Yeah, thank you very much for that interesting question. Well, the MiCA legislation is very particular, but I think it's a very good example for our discussion here because it tries to regulate crypto assets in the European Union, so already on a level which covers more than one jurisdiction. But of course, the issue here is that we only can set requirements for the use on our European continent. And it is not at all possible to cover any other use of crypto assets, which is of course also accessible by the European citizens from starting from Europe. So the ambition is quite modest, because it just says when you want to issue crypto assets in the European Union, then you need to comply with certain requirements. If you do that, at least you are able to issue these crypto assets and do the business through across Europe. But we are certainly aware of the assets. As far as level playing field is concerned, there is not there's a similar set of rules which are applicable: licensing, capital requirements, compliance, and all these kind of things. But of course, a crypto issuer is not a bank, and from this, and therefore the risks are not the same. The instruments are not the same. The business models are not the same. So the regulation is not completely the same. But of course, it leads to certain obligations crypto issuers hadn't had before. And so it reduces the arbitrage between traditional banking products and crypto assets.
Yes, thank you. And following this line of thought, how you think the financial risks should be addressed, given the transnational nature of digital services?
Well, indeed, the transnational nature I alluded already to. The limit of reach of this European legislation is clear, and this is why we advocate very much that a global approach is taken, that global institutions address these issues, because it doesn't serve financial stability, IT security. In all jurisdictions, the same cryptos are regulated differently. And here we have a similar pattern, which what you alluded to, that we have a true global product, and it needs a global response by the regulators and by legislators. But we have a lack of institutions in that area. We don't have a global parliament. We don't have a global supervisor. We don't have legal authorities which can enforce this. And here, from my point of view, this is the biggest backlash for the rule of law and for governmental control of digitalization, be it competition, be it banking regulation, be it IT security, that there's no global governance in place which can address that.
Yeah, of course. But you do provoke a question: should there be, and how to come up with one that a legislative scheme that would have a democratic accountability in the global context? Is it even possible?
Well, there are examples. The Basel Committee of Banking Supervision is one. It is one of the very rare existing global standards which is implemented in all the jurisdictions vigorously and precisely, but you need to some body to give another body a mandate to make these standards. This has been the case for the Basel Committee of Banking Supervision in 1973, after a financial crisis. Then the state said, okay, we need global banking standards. And now it would be up to, for example, G20 or whatever, to mandate an authority to set up these kind of standards.
Yes, thank you. But now, following this question, but asking Karolina Toloba, what are financial supervisors actually doing to help achieve an equitable access to financial digital market?
We keep an ongoing dialogue with the industry, with the different market players. We think is key for that, and also with our supervisors and policymakers. it's very important for both sides, because we get to know the state of the art of technology and business cases in the market, and the market can know our supervisory expectations, and we can clarify some regulatory matters. And they have tools to do that. They have these innovation hubs where they can contact the banking authorities to request clarification about a regulation or a business model or requirements when getting a license. And they can also use this regulatory sandbox where a new entrant, maybe it could be an IT company or a startup or a bank or whoever, can test a project in a controlled environment. So we are monitoring the project together with them, and they can be a small company or a big company. It doesn't matter. So we can accompany them to ensure that the tests are well performed, and to share what regulatory matters and supervisory expectations. And I must say that we follow the principle of technology neutrality. We don't impose or discriminate any technology, but we are also concerned about risks. So our mission is to ensure a safe environment and a resilient financial sector.
Yes, thank you very much. And since we have 8 minutes to finish our session, instead of having a final round of thoughts, I thought I come up with a more challenging task, which is we still haven't touched algorithms. And, just to spice up the discussion, 90 seconds per person to tell us, should tech companies reveal their algorithm, and in what circumstances? I know it's secular, forgive me, audience will love it. Starting with Karolina with a say. Karolina?
Sorry, myself or Karolina?
Yes. Karolina.
No,
Okay, thank you. Well, regarding the sharing algorithms, is a difficult question. I think the companies have the intellectual rights of their algorithms. That's true, but it's also we say in the financial sector that, for example, banks are always responsible for what they do, even when they outsource something to a third party. So they should know for high risk algorithms how it works, to be really aware of what the algorithm is doing. So it's a difficult question to put the barrier between the intellectual property rights and the need to know of some stakeholders.
Thank you very much. Joachim.
May I respond as in my responsibility for IT in Bundesbank? I'm not at all ready to publish the algorithms of our programs where we analyze the stability of banks, where we analyze monetary developments, the security mechanisms for our goals, and all these kind of things. So there may be a case for the publication of algorithm when there is a legitimate public interest, that everybody knows what is in this algorithm, but there's no case at all for a general obligation to publish algorithms.
Thank you very much. Arvind.
I think this is a very interesting question, and I'm glad you asked it. I think the approach has to be, first of all, company-facing internal algorithms. I don't think so are so much of a priority. It's the consumer-facing algorithms which we deal with on an everyday basis, where whether it's the neutrality of platforms or content and how we are searching for products, those things which will come under the purview, under the first purview. And my approach is that there has to be a more collaborative approach here. Companies should sign up, and balancing between their innovation and their, the intellectual property, as Carolina from Spain had already mentioned, vis-a-vis the interest of the consumers. The one of the approaches that we have tested and has worked is create this clean data rooms, certified data rooms, where there is a diversity of data, and the algorithms can come in, process input, and give us an output if they meet certain standards on the outputs, which where they've handled a lot of diverse data and have not discriminated or have performed in an unbiased manner. Then we can start certifying algorithms instead of revealing what the algorithm is. So the outcomes can be made more open. The outcomes of algorithms on a very diverse global data sets can be tested, and can be certified by neutral authorities that these are very neutral and have no biasness built into that. This could be probably the first solution to think about this.
Thank you very much. Will? We cannot hear you. No. Okay, so let's switch to Karolina and hope that will solve technical issues. Karolina, please.
Well, information. The information necessary under the GDPR. What can I say? The best solution, providing for everything, at least as far as the right of access is concerned. Meaningful information about the logic involved and consequences. The position of the Commission was always that trade secrets should be protected. This right of access, is not there for the data subject to verify the veracity of data, the appropriateness of certain things. This is for the data protection authorities, which are equipped enough as competition authorities, as all other authorities, to get insight into also trade secrets, intellectually or information protected by intellectual property, and not to disclose it, and on the other hand to ensure enforcement of the legislation they are responsible for. Finally, I would like to underline that this precise question, so the logic, what does it mean? Because meaningful information about the logic involved, what does it mean? It's now pending in front of the Court of Justice in the case C200C/22, where more than 10 questions were asked by Austrian court concerning precisely disputes about access to data in the assessment of creditworthiness. And well, we will get the answer from the Court of Justice. What does it mean, and which information about the logic, meaningful information about the logic involved, which should be easily accessible and easily to understand, is supposed to be provided, and how it's to work.
Thank you very much. We will get another go for Will. I'm not sure if he is frozen in his frame. So unless within next 70 seconds he manages to unfreeze, I would like to thank you very much for this discussion. And I think even the last round on the algorithm, it shows us how multidimensional the regulation of digital markets is, and what it is that we are facing. And I think in terms of legislation, but also supervision and enforcement, this is something that we cannot really compare to anything that we've had so far. So the technological pace of development and the multi-layered nature of the problem, and creates really unique challenges. And what Arvind was saying, and Joachim, actually both of Karolina's, it's all the same. We have these local problems, local tastes to global developments, and then local solutions are not going to work out, but at the same time, they are needed to address localities in a global common frame. So yes, a lot of work ahead of us, and technology fails, as we have just seen with Will that disappeared and it's not there with us anymore. So thank you very much. I hope he's not in time, not lost in time and space. And see you around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.